You wanted the best. You've got the best podcast. The hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show, the preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. The CEOs, authors, thought leaders, visionaries, and motivators. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
Hi, folks. It's Voss here from thechrisvossshow.com. Ladies and gentlemen, there are ladies, things that makes it official. I'm able to hit those high notes at the beginning of the show because I use the same rubber bands that Michael Jackson did. Anyway, guys, we want you to refer the show to your family, friends, and relatives because, you know, you're really smart. You've spent 16 years and 2,400 episodes listening to the Chris Voss Show, and your brain has probably reached a level of cranium capacity that is unknown to any prior primates of humanity before. Did I say primates twice? I don't know. I'm just making up, people. Give me a break. Anyway, but you want other people to be as smart as you so that when you go to those Christmas dinners and Thanksgiving dinners, you don't have to talk to Uncle John. And Uncle John, of course, never checks Snopes. So that's the problem there. Go to goodreads.com for just Chris Voss, LinkedIn.com for just Chris Voss, Chris Voss one on the TikTokity, and all those crazy places on the internet. And of course, you're testing their ability to figure out how to work the internet. That's always good, too. Opinions expressed by guests on the podcast are solely their own and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the host or the Chris Voss Show. Some guests of the show may be advertising on the podcast, but it is not an endorsement or review of any kind. Anyway, we have an amazing young man on the show. We're going to be talking about his hot new book off the presses and some of his deets and how you can do stuff better, especially in management leadership. Who thunk it? Anyway, he's the author of the latest book to come out called Manage Your Gaps, Reclaiming the Awesomeness of Management by Matthew D. Lay. Out July 17th, 2024. I'm having a brain seizure, evidently. Matt is a management expert and co-founder at Inflection Point Nexus Advisors. He has over 2 decades of experience. He helps organizations bridge critical gaps in management, teamwork, and leadership. He advised that my company should fire me, but my name's on it, so it didn't work. Anyway, I need all the help I can get, people, especially his. He is guided by 2 key philosophies: fulfillment, ROI, and fulfillment formula, enabling individuals and organizations to maximize impact with less effort. His diverse career spans roles as a software engineer, pastor, disaster response coordinator, ultimate Frisbee coach. That's the pinnacle right there. Supply chain project manager and dedicated volunteer. He's driven by curiosity, community building, and lifelong learning. Matt has a MDiv, an MBA, and multiple professional credentials. And I went to college. I didn't go to college. I started my first company at 18, so I have no idea what any of that means. Welcome to the show, Matthew. How are you?
Oh, man. That was worth the price of admission. Thank you for that.
My PayPal's over to you. Anyway, guys, give us a .com. Where can people find you on the interwebs?
If you want to find out about the company, ipnadvisors.com. You want to find out about the book, it's manageyourgaps.com. You can find me at either of those places, or I'm most active on LinkedIn.
Now, you lead off with the book. Management gets a bad rap on Amazon here. What's going on there, and how does your book help get that bad rap fixed?
Yeah, so where this came from is as I've been doing consulting and working with organizations, and frankly, being in the midst of organizations as a manager and as a leader, everyone talks about everyone can be a leader. Everyone should leadership. Let's have it at all levels. Nobody gets out there and says everyone could be a manager. Really struggled to be a good manager. And we sort of denigrate it. And I was seeing sort of 2 narratives going on. Either management was the gold star for standout contribution or tenure. So it's like, you've been here long enough. You did a great job on that project. We're going to make you the manager. Or it was the JV League for future leaders to say, let's just try it out for a bit. This doesn't really count. But when you're ready, we'll move you into leadership. And I say, that ain't it. This is actually detrimenting organizations' ability to be not only sustainable, but to successfully grow. We need to reclaim that management itself is actually awesome. We've just given it a bad rap and we're using it incorrectly.
Yeah. And people leave companies. It's interesting to me. Like, I believe, don't quote me but I'm pretty sure I know this unless I've gone insane, which is also true. I believe the number one reason people leave a company is poor leadership and management. That's the reason they leave my company, because I suck. No, I'm just kidding. I wrote a book on it. Anyway, I'm probably not, I'm always working on it though. I don't ever think I'm great. Keep that in mind. Don't be a Dunning-Kruger person. So one thing you mentioned, we were talking in the green room beforehand, that one of the things you help do is managers that maybe, or leaders who are, maybe doing really well with what they're doing and managing people well, and maybe something's not working in the car parts. You got to get under the hood there and maybe change the oil or fix something mentally. Tell us about that a little bit.
Yeah, we kind of joke about it internally at IPN. It's like we're always on the outlook for miserable leaders. And what we mean by that is someone who's like, this used to be fun. I used to love this job. Something happened in the last 6 to 12 months where I just lost my mojo. The crud is built up. Just something's going on. And we're like, person, you have hit an inflection point, which means what's got you here isn't going to get you there. And a lot of the time, a big portion of that formula is how does management show up in your space? Managers are, like you said, people leave bad managers, bad leaders, because they're your culture champions. They're the people that have the most influence on the people's day-to-day experience of the organization. And if that's been a struggle, that shows up as misery for leaders, because they're asked to do way too much, or they're like, I told everyone what to do and no one's figured it out. And so we help them untangle what we call uncovering the matrix to answer the question of what do you need to do a little bit differently? And a lot of times it's not really big shifts. It's just a different perspective.
And that's really, an important thing. I mean, sometimes we get stuck in our own scotomas and our own blind spots, or, belief systems that are self-limiting. I remember years ago, I loved hiring employees and the management stuff. And then one day I was very disgruntled, and I realized that the problem was I was hiring employees. No, I'm just kidding. We just do the jokes here, folks. Employees are wonderful people. Sometimes they're better than me. In fact, a lot of my employees have been better than me, and that's been awesome.
That's the goal.
That's the goal.
You want to hire giants. You don't want to hire people that are smaller than you. You don't want to be the ceiling of your organization. You want to be the foundation. You want to build above you.
Always spend time hiring people. Do multiple interviews. That's the key. That's one of the keys. There's many keys. I'm sure you consult a lot on that. Now, you talk about the gap in your book in the title. What is the gap and how to manage them? Can you tease us out a little bit on what this gap thing is?
Yeah, so actually it's 3 gaps, the strategic, the tactical, and the operational. And basically the strategic is, does your organization value the manager role as part of organizational design? And so we need to bridge that gap where we recognize that managers as a role have something to offer. The tactical gap is, do managers know what the heck they're supposed to be doing? So if managers aren't leaders, what is it that managers actually do, which is the active management most of the time? So we help them understand that. And then the operational one is answering the question, if teamwork makes the dream work, what makes the team work? And that is, I think it's one of 2 things. It's either leaders who are good at engaging in management, or it's managers who are good at engaging in leadership. So we have to help you understand what is management versus leadership, who's a manager versus a leader. And once we kind of have clarity on the concepts, it's just mixing it all together. And that's what leads to the teamwork actually making an impact.
You mentioned something too earlier. I think it was about, you used the word culture or something to that effect.
Culture champions?
Yeah. Them leaders being culture champions. I learned this a long time ago. I think I got it from Peter Senge's book, The Fifth Discipline, and creating a learning organization. I remember thinking, the first time I want to build a big organization, I want it to be a learning organization. And so a lot of leaders, when I talk to them, I'll ask them 2 things that they seem to, most of the times, maybe I don't talk to the right people, or you've talked to probably more than I have over 20 years, but I'll ask managers, what is your management style? And they have no clue. And so they don't have it defined in their own head, let alone, their people are like, what is the hell going on? And then culture, managing the culture, the community, the health of the community, making sure that, you're a good, fair judge as a leader. One of the things I try and always do with my leadership is be transparent and to signal to people through my beacon of leadership that I'm a fair judge, that I'm going to give them a fair shake, that if they, if there's an issue, I'm going to try to be a good judge especially if it's a conflict between two different employees or management or, some sort of conflict, I'm going to try and be a good judge. I'm going to make decisions because, people see people get fired out the door and they think, oh, Chris on a tear. He woke up on the wrong side of the bed, stuff like that. Sometimes there's popularity contest cultures that are kind of very high schoolish, where if you don't kiss the boss's ass enough, it doesn't matter how much work you do, but if you don't kiss the boss's ass enough, you've got that culture where that high school culture where they're like, if you don't, you don't do any work and just kiss the boss's ass and you get a promotion. So, trying to make sure that there's that sequential sort of culture. I don't know if you want to talk about that, but I find most people I talked about, they have no intention, awareness, or design. And for me, that sort of design is paramount.
Oh man, you're dropping, I'll say dropping gems there. There's so much in there we could pick into. I'll start with the culture piece. Two of the things I talk about with clients is culture and process. You got both all the time, whether you know it or not. The thing is, there's sort of a 4-box that they fit into. It's visibility. Is it explicit or is it implicit? And it's the intentionality. Is it ad hoc or intentional? Most cultures, most processes fall into the ad hoc, implicit. So nobody talks about them. Everyone just knows them. It's tribal knowledge. And you just kind of make them up as you go. The goal is to take your culture and your processes and move them into the intentional and explicit. So they're named, they're documented. People understand what it actually means so that when you're not in the room as the leader, particularly, people are still know what the boundaries are of what's acceptable and what we're looking to do in this space. Because the minute you leave the room, if people don't know what to do next, then you are the culture. And that's a culture of one. And that is and that's a lot of where miserable leaders come from. They grow to the scalability where the culture of one no longer works. And that's a huge inflection point.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just kind of shocked. Maybe it's because I've just been so focused on it. And then, some people, they've adopted the culture you come into. And sometimes that can't be good, especially if you're doing a rebuild or a reset, or a company has had some toxic leadership. You've got to come in and you've got to sell people that you're going to change the culture to something healthy, that you're a healthy leader, and sometimes that can be more work than just creating your own company. But, any company I create or group or community that I create, I have a lot of gaming groups online, dating groups and different things. Any sort of thing that I create, the moment I launch that thing, there's a focus on what are my rules, what are the community's rules, what is my intent on the culture and safety that I want to build in that community, what does my leadership look like? And unfortunately, I can do a lot of that in my sleep. But even then, you kind of have to ask yourself, you have to do what I like to call the old, it's from Hunt for Red October, where you check your 6. You turn the boat around and make sure that you're not being hunted by another submarine. I forget what it's called, but it's, you flip, you check your 6 and you go, am I really holding up what I think I'm holding up? Does this really stand up? Are my actions following through on my words?
Yeah. And that reminds me of so one of the concepts I share with people, I love giving people frameworks and ways of understanding. I call it the 4 C's. If you're struggling in any spot, check your 4 C's. It's, do people know that they're cared for? Are you giving clarity? Are you being consistent? And are you communicating? If you can do those 4 things well, you will weather pretty much any storm that you're going to come across. It's usually one of those 4 that's missing. And ideally, it would actually be over communicate. It just didn't fit with the alliteration. So we just say communicate 6 times.
But and that's real important. It's like the legs of a stool.
Yeah.
Yeah. You miss one, things collapse. You've got to, being a leader is hard. And I remember, I'm sure that people are going to scream in the audience because they're like, he said it for the 5,000th time. But I used to keep a picture on my desk. It's still in my storage that says, basically the implication was just because you're given a title doesn't mean you're good at leadership or something to that effect. And you need to earn that title every day with your people. And so that can be grounded, it's really easy being a CEO of the company you own to, lord around your 100 employees and be like, I know everything. Which I do as Napoleon. I dress up as Napoleon too, and I put my hand in the chest just like that. And then I lord around with the sword and knight people and stuff. Sometimes I chop off heads, but judge says I can't.
We don't talk about that. Not live. We don't talk about that.
The judge is working on that. I get one of my 6 ankle bracelets off next week, so I'm pretty happy about that. All that jokes on the Chris Voss Show. We're hitting all the greatest hits of the callbacks on the Chris Voss Show today. It's early days. What maybe is in your book that you want people to maybe teased out, to know about, to help them pick it up. Maybe we haven't touched on. I know there's power of epic management here, and in the epics spelled funky, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. So I'll pick a couple of things. One, just because you mentioned it earlier about managers not knowing their management style, articulation is extremely important. Like, because it's very hard to feel successful in something you can't define. So if you don't know what management is for your organization or for yourself, it's really, really hard to feel successful in it. So you need to be able to articulate what that is. A concept that I love to share a lot is knowing the difference between rock stars and rising stars. Like, everyone wants to shine. Everyone wants to be a star. But there's two very different ways along the pole that people tend to show up within that. The rising star is the person who wants to use this role to prepare them for the next role. And the rock star is the person who wants to take this role and go deep into it and become the expert on this particular role. As particularly new managers, they tend to treat everyone like a rising star because they are usually themselves a rising star. If you've moved into management, most likely you've been promoted into that role, and possibly you're looking to be promoted into another role. So when someone stands out on your team, you're like, I got to support them. I got to make them into a rising star. I get them ready for the next thing. They might just be a rock star. And so letting people know that you're aware where they're at and asking them, are you a rising star or rock star? Which also can shift. Becoming a new parent, I wanted to be a rock star. I didn't want to go into a new job. I just wanted to get real good at the one I was doing so that I could be present for my kids as they were, becoming people in the world. Other times in my career, I want to be a rising star. So having that be like a check-in, just be, are you a rising star? Or are you a rock star? That's a good distinction to help people sort of figure out where they're at.
Yeah. How do you have that conversation with? So I'll give you an example on how to handle that, or not how to handle that. I'll give you an example of what happened to me as a kid. So I was like a stupid 20-year-old kid. Things haven't changed much, clearly, except for the age. And I worked at a dealership, and I was a business guy back then. There was a leasing company I worked from. I fell out of business. I had no other skills, and since it was kind of in the car leasing business, I did dealership sales for a year. And so one of those things where you find your way, and it was actually the greatest sales opportunity for me in the world. It changed my life. But I would always wear a suit because I grew up poor. I wanted to be that professional guy. I was going to school for being a stockbroker. I always wore a suit and tie and looked nice. Cheap Sears suit, nothing special, but I wore a suit. And so I kind of stood out from a lot of the other dudes. And I'd been studying how to become business. I spent most of my 18 to 22 age, reading Harvard Business Review, trying to get prepared for being a CEO someday. And the management one day came to me and they go, hey, we really think you're a future management person, and we're going to start seeing if we can't develop you. But the GM made a comment. He goes, look at some of these lackeys around here, see, it's kind of rough, and they had a used car division. Those guys are pretty salty and good men, but they can be a little, basically all the salesmen would disappear anytime a cop prowled the lot because they're worried about child support, alimony, or I don't know, whatever warrants they had from the weekend. But so he was like, this people are pretty salty around here. We want to invest in you. Me and my stupid mouth, like a couple days later, went up to the assistant manager and basically made the inference. And I was like, yeah, you're right. Looking around here, I probably should be good. And there are, Dave's right. There are lackeys around here. And the assistant manager looked at me and you could see he was like, what? and that was the end of that. I think after that, I was sick for 3 days. When I came back, they're like, yeah, we're not doing this with you. Fuck off. They fired me. I didn't call in sick. That helped too. But yeah, telling that to the assistant manager and passing that along was not one of my brighter ideas. So I think I bring up that story. So how do you be careful not to overinflate someone's ego, especially when they're a stupid young kid like me or old kid like me? How do you handle that so that you're not creating a monster headwise? Because I've done that with salespeople and they just get worse sometimes if they're already bad. They're already doing enough cocaine and hookers on the side, and then they're just like, I'm the best salesman you have. Thanks for telling me. I'm going to do more. And you're like, God damn it.
Yeah, no, I guess two things within that is one of my favorite talks that I do is called Managers Are Zero Value Add Non-Leaders, which is a part about the clarity piece. And one of the big pieces with that is that managers and leaders are contingent roles in every organization. The only people who actually add value to an organization are the contributors. You fire all the contributors, your managers and leaders are going to sit around, twiddle their thumbs, or else they're going to have to actually do the real work that people are doing at the contribution level. So what the heck is the point of a manager or a leader? Leaders are to set where's the future vision of the organization. Where are we going to find more value to mine in the future? And the manager's role is to multiply that value, which means you have to know your people. You are contingent to their success. And if you're doing it all yourself, you are, one, not doing management. You're just a high-paid individual contributor that's probably screwing everyone else around you, and they're not creating more value. So you're a negative multiplier to your organization, or at the very least a fractional. So helping them understand, like, look, if you want to step into this role, what success looks like is going to be different. It's not how well you do, it's how well the team does. And if the team's struggling, you got to own that, because that's what you're here to do now.
Yeah, it's so important. So talk to us about the stuff you do at IPN, Inflection Point Nexus Advisors, some of the different, how you help people, how they can approach, onboard with you, etc.
Yeah, so I mean, we've got a bunch of different on-ramps because we know people are coming at different levels of, we've online courses, we do a lot of facilitation work. Our big thing is programs, helping people institute new things into their overall organization, and then being strategic partners. Like, we have a role of Uncover the Matrix, where we'll be on site for 7 weeks to help you say, okay, what is actually going on here? All the way up to being like a fractional chief strategy officer to help design the future. And what that's all boiling down to is people a lot of times confuse progress with activity and don't recognize that progress is actually a 3-step process. One, you have to be oriented. Where are you trying to get to? What's your why? Is everyone aligned to that? Then it's activation, which is, what do we actually have to do to get there? And then it's sustained momentum. How do we make sure that we're doing this in a way that the fire keeps burning and the engine keeps running?
Yeah. How do we keep the fires burning, as they say? Culture transformation, strategic facilitation, organizational health. We talked about culture, leadership development. This is what a lot of people do. I'll cue you up on this on the pitch. You know, one of the things that happen, we talked this about on the show, is a lot of, somebody will be, being a good employee and they're kicking ass, taking names. Maybe they're top salespeople, maybe they're top person that's on that team, and they're really good at being the worker bee sort of person. And, maybe they lead the team a little bit, but then they go, the company goes, hey man, we're promoting you, we're giving you the title and the money, and have fun with that. And a lot of times they're not developed as leaders. They need a whole, maybe, you correct me, they need a whole new skill set, or maybe a deeper skill set of what leadership is if they've never had it before.
100%. And I mean, that is one of the oldest tales we talk about all the time. Don't take your best, like, whatever salesperson and make them your worst manager. And the reason we do that is, I think it's part of the Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule applies here, that when you move into management, I don't call them soft or hard skills anymore. I call them transferable and contextual. So you are really, really good at the contextual skill set that leads to success on your team as a contributor. So we now put you in management. That success skill set is only 20% of what makes you good at management. The other 80% are all the transferable skills. Can you help people have clarity on what their role is? Do they have good job descriptions? Do you have good organizational design for the right number of people? Do you have clarity on what success is? Do you have metrics? Do you have goals? How are people trending as they move through the organization? Are you helping them be better tomorrow than they were yesterday? All of those pieces are transferable because they will help you be successful in any organization. I don't care if you have no idea what the people on your team do. If you can bring that skill set in, you will at least be 80%, which is a passing grade. It's not something you write home about. You still have to figure out what your people are doing if you want to be a great manager and an exceptional manager. But that skill set is the important piece. But when people get moved into that role for the first time, they start to get afraid. It's the theory and practice are very different. All of a sudden, you're second guessing yourself. Some of that imposter syndrome might set in. You double down on the skill set you know, which is the contextual piece. And if you're already getting 100% on that 20%, it's not going to increase your grade. You have to be able to do the other piece, and helping people articulate the difference between the two and how to develop that skill set. That's a huge part of what the book and the Epic Management Model is about.
You made a coffee cup comment, I like to call them, that said something. I have bad ADHD, but it said something about how you need to be improving your people every day. Something to that effect. There was a line that you had there. Do you remember
How
that?
you help your people be better tomorrow than they were yesterday.
Yeah, I need to mount that on my wall, or a coffee cup. or maybe, a knuckle crusher. My math teacher had one of those in high school, big paddleboard. He broke someone's hand, and that was the end of his career. But don't do that, folks. They're just jokes. Don't write me.
We're professionals here. Don't try.
Attorneys are calling me. Yeah, don't do this at home or your office. But no, I need to put that on a coffee cup because it's really important. I've talked about how one of the things I always used to do is move around my office and try and touch the hearts and minds of people, check in with them. How's things at home? How's things going in your life? How you holding up? Can you give me your social security card and loan me your Amex? That sort of thing. Letting people know I give a shit about them.
Yeah.
I watched the CEO of HP move throughout his day and how it's a bad word to use with HR, touching people, hearts and minds, but it is in essence, I don't know, I just haven't found a better word, but it's connecting people with, and letting them know that you give a shit.
Yeah.
That, you're just not, hey, do you have your TPS reports? Okay, fuck off. See you, bye. That sort of shit from Office Space.
Gonna have to come in on Saturday.
And a lot of times, checking in on people, I've had employees that have struggled and you're like, man, we're probably gonna have to fire Bob because Bob's fucking shit up right now. And turns out they're in the midst of a divorce. And Bob was a great employee for 5 years, and suddenly Bob's off the mark. I've had to be a psychologist as a CEO. I'm sure you've seen this movie a million times, but sometimes I have to do brain surgery, psychology level, and I have to get in there and I'll have a salesman come to me and be like, I've been selling all sorts of shit, and suddenly I can't sell anymore. I don't know what's going on. And you're like, great. Like, I need more work. No, but you've got to get in there and find out. And sometimes maybe it's a home situation or something's not going in their life. One of the big blowups I usually have with salespeople is they start making a lot of money, becoming more successful than they've ever been. And so they kind of feel a little fat. They don't have that driver of starvation anymore. And, then you got to deal with that. I don't know, some of your thoughts on some of that.
Yeah, no, that's it. I mean, that's definitely the care piece of the care, clarity, consistency, and communication that shows up in that piece. I think management, probably the biggest reason managers exist is one-on-ones. Like, one-on-ones are the touch point of the organization. That's what makes it flow and move forward smoothly, consistently, and helping people grow. And two, I think of the one is knowing that the one-on-one is not the manager's time, it's the employee's time. And what the manager is asking is basically, how am I helping you move forward in this? And two questions I love to ask are, what's something exceptional you did since our last meeting? And what's something like outstanding you're looking forward to? A couple of reasons. One, people don't like to toot their own horns most of the time. Maybe in the sales world, like my experience of it is a little bit different. You got to have a little bit of that hubris to be in that space a lot of the time. But people struggle to name their gifts. And so asking them to do so on a regular basis helps them open up. And also, if I go 2 or 3 one-on-ones where they can't name something exceptional they did or something outstanding or they're excited about, that's basically like a stay interview. I'm like, what's going on? You're not feeling it right now. I'm not getting it. Let's take this meeting to talk about that. Like, is there something going on in this space that we need to address, bring to the surface? And that can be that human side of things, that you're not overseeing a role, you're overseeing a person. And yes, they have accountabilities, but they are all the other things outside of those boundaries. And if you're not accepting that into the mix, those pressures from the outside are going to start to crush those accountabilities real quick. So you have to figure out how to bring it in to the conversation and create that as a safe space. And one-on-ones, that's the touch point for managers.
Yeah. Yeah. You see, you use the touching again. HR is going to call both of us now.
As long as it's above the belt. I mean, most of them will be above the belt.
Above the belt.
It's hearts and minds. It's all above the belt.
I don't touch anybody anymore since the 90s. I saw that Michael Douglas movie in the 90s. And that's when we had to start doing the sexual harassment on people. And I don't touch anybody. In fact, I have one of those bubbles I roll around my office in from John Travolta. Like, pulling 70s reference right now.
Or like the Demolition Man high fives where everyone does the high five. But
yeah, just from over there, 6 feet distance. COVID was my cure. I mean, because now I have an excuse to stay 6 feet away from me. I do that with my family and relatives too at Christmas.
And they all think.
Yeah, they don't want to be near me either because I only bathe once every month or something.
Just being economical and environmental.
Yeah, it helps if you do that bathe once a month thing too, because people just stay the fuck away from you and have some peace. Yeah. Doesn't work well with the wife, but that's not my problem. Anyway, enough jokes aside. As we go out, any final thoughts or tease outs you want to do and all that good stuff? Maybe we missed.
I think just a shout out to you for doing this. I love the program. This has been a great interview. And
I've done it once or twice.
Yeah. If you're in a miserable leader space and you're like, I don't know why, look me up, give me a phone call, 30 minutes. We can talk. If that's all it takes to get you unstuck, happy to do it.
All my employees are dialing phones right now. I don't know what's going on, but I can hear yours ringing in the background. That's weird. So give people a final pitch out. How can they onboard with you? The .coms, et cetera, et cetera. Get to know you better on the internet.
Yeah. IPNadvisors.com or manageyourgaps.com. That's the company or the book, or you can find me on LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm. There you go. So thank you very much for coming on the show. It's been very insightful. You got some fun. Who knew management and business talk could be fun and chatty, Matthew? Matt, thank you very much for coming on the show. It's been wild to have you on.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it.
And no touching, right?
No touching.
Just want to make that clear. Don't touch people. I'll get a call tomorrow from somebody who said, Chris said I could touch the hearts and mind at work, so I went around the office today. Yeah, don't do that. That's going to get you with HR. That's why I don't have an HR department. I work for myself. It's because
it gets in the way.
Yeah, I touch too many people, evidently. Anyway, it's kind of like Nick Cannon in that sort of sense of a way. And Elon Musk. They've got 50 kids or something each, I think, at this point. I think they're basically preparing a basketball team to play each other. So there's a joke. Anyway, guys, so thanks to my audience for tuning in. Order the book wherever fine books are sold. It is entitled Manage Your Gaps, Reclaiming the Awesomeness of Management by Matthew D. Lay, out in July 17th, 2024. Thanks so much for tuning in. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, linkedin.com/Chris Voss, Chris Voss1 on the TikTok, and Facebook.com/Chris Voss. Be good to each other. Stay safe, or else I'll see you next time. There we go. That should